Now, why don't we look at modern day? Why don't I share with our listeners a little bit, just a really brief recap of the model that I'm working with, and then I'm going to ask you a couple of specific questions about strategies for the modern man who's trying to evolve and increase the quality of their consciousness, how they can do that. And it'll just be very quick if I share it through my model because it's something they're familiar with. It's just,
Good.
so in the blueprint that I'm using, I say, if you want this outcome that I'm calling magnetic, your magnetic life, you could call it, I don't want to use words like enlightenment, or just call it fulfillment or low entropy. Pick your metaphor. They're all valid metaphors. But I just call it magnetic, whatever, because it's very enticing to people. I want all the things that I can have. Great. I say you need first authentic alignment. And 1 + 2 equals that outcome naturally. So the first is authentic alignment. And that would be, for instance, if you were raised in a family where you became a furniture maker because everybody in your family had been a furniture maker, and you had been in an arranged marriage and you weren't able to marry Pamela, and you weren't able to follow your passions, and you were living that life of like, this is who I should be because this is what my parents wanted me to be, or this is what I feel I have to do. So the first thing we need is authentic alignment and clarity, and being willing to own what our authentic wants, needs, boundaries, and values are, so that we don't become, because I actually think owning those things in a healthy, conscious, compassionate way is the antidote to what we might call the toxic self-centeredness. Somebody who's like, my cup is full, it's going to naturally overflow wherever they go. But somebody who's like, oh, I can't do anything for myself, I only have to be of service to others. Oh, I can't, I'm afraid of this, I'm not that. And they're not being authentic, and they're not being honest with themselves. They're false advertising. So they're going into relationships saying, you need an accountant, I'm an accountant. But really, they're a salesperson. What you needed was an HR director, So first we need that authentic alignment. Then the other metaphor I use is your vehicle of consciousness, just what I call the bodies or the avatar that we're in. And we want to start looking at how we expand, like your models have helped us do, into a more multidimensional understanding of reality and the human experience. And we hear things like mind, body, spirit, other things like that. But how do we practically apply that? So I really like fast cars. It's something my avatar has always really enjoyed, even though nobody else in my family likes them. I like cars, so I use a car metaphor. And it's something that everybody can understand. So I say, in your vehicle of consciousness, you have a brain. That's your supercomputer. That's your interface to the system. And a lot of us have suboptimal software that was installed before the age of 7. So you want to learn how to remove the fearful software, beliefs, perceptual filters that block you from whatever it is that you're not expressing. And all of the other systems in that car or that vehicle need the computer to run. All these systems need each other, the same as in a car. And they all influence each other. But if you're fixing a car that has a problem with the body, fixing the engine isn't going to help. That's often why energetic healing doesn't work. It's like putting burn cream on and then touching the hot stove again. So we need the supercomputer. Our body is like the engine, and it needs proper fuel. It needs a full tank of gas if you want it to go. It needs proper maintenance and the proper fluids. But even if you've got a full tank of gas and a great computer and with perfect software, your heart is the battery. And your heart, when we have it open, is how we connect to source or the LCS, and how we connect to our true nature of the fabric of consciousness. And emotions are your navigation system that help inform you where your entropy is, what you need to work on, and whether you're piloting that vehicle of consciousness towards what you think you should be, or if you're actually on a path of making decisions that you prefer. And that sort of having that system is how I help men very quickly diagnose and repair when something in their life feels out of alignment, where they are struggling to bridge that gap between achievement and fulfillment. So from your model, something I know you're very good at is helping people understand beliefs, which would be part of the software. So what's a practical tool that a modern man can use to identify, remove, or replace fear and beliefs? And how is that preventing them from piloting that vehicle of consciousness on their sort of more authentic magnetic path?
There's a good way to recognize your fear, and that is look at your emotional self, look at your experiences, look at your feelings, and think back over the past week, say. If you can think back over the past week of every time you felt something negative. Now, negative means obviously things like anger, but
Mm-hmm.
it can also be just stress, upset,
Mm-hmm.
annoyed, put out,
Mm-hmm.
aggravated, all of that stuff that isn't fun
Yeah.
and light and wonderful and happy. Well, that's negative. It's the negative side.
Yeah.
So just think in your last week, how, did you feel in the last week anything that was negative? Did you ever feel upset, annoyed, angry, stressed? Well, if you did, that's because you have fear.
Yeah.
So most people will look and say, I only have to go back like 3 hours. I can find negativity, and I don't have to go back
Right.
a whole week. And then you look at those feelings, and every negative feeling you have is attached to a fear. You wouldn't have that negative feeling if you didn't have a fear.
Mm-hmm.
So now the game is, all right, I'm feeling annoyed. I'm feeling a little angry.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody just told me that, the work I handed in was just, not good enough. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling a little angry about that.
Yeah.
Well, there's a fear there. It's the I'm not good enough
I'm
fear.
not good enough.
And
Shame.
when somebody tells you that you weren't good enough, boy, it just resonates. That I'm not good enough fear just resonates like crazy. And generally, your reaction to that is you get angry. When
Yeah.
somebody resonates one of your fears, you immediately get angry. So you look at all those and you say, where did that come from? Why? Why do I have that fear? Why don't I feel good enough? Why do I feel inadequate to do the things that I need to do? Where's that come from?
Yeah.
And you may never find the reason. Sometimes you will. I've heard the craziest reasons. Oh, well, when I was 3 years old, my mom bought my two siblings teddy bears and didn't get me one.
Yeah.
And I knew it's because I was unworthy. And ever since then, I felt unworthy. Well,
Yeah.
you were the oldest of the children, and mom thought you just outgrown those sorts
Yeah.
of things. So she didn't get you one, but you don't know all of that. So
You
you
made
just,
it mean something different.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, so anyway, it can be something silly like that, but a lot of times you won't find that. You don't have that memory. You won't find
Mhm.
what it is. So
And you
then
don't
you
have
just
to.
have to recognize it. I have that fear.
Mm-hmm.
And that fear is actually making my choices for me. When
Mm-hmm.
I go to make a choice, the kind of job I want, the kind of people I interact with, that fear of inadequacy is making my choices. I make this choice because of that fear.
Right.
I make that choice because, you know, that doesn't trigger that fear, whatever. And it's those fears that make your choices. Well, you evolve or
Mm.
de-evolve your consciousness by the choices, the quality of the choices you make.
Yes.
So one, okay, let's find out what the problem is. Negativity. If your life is not full of positiveness and happiness and smiles, and if you're not full of joy, then you have fear. And you need to find it first, own it. All right, that is my fear. Don't excuse it. Don't say, oh, yeah, but that's because my life sucked. So, of course, I'm
Mm-hmm.
like that. No, own it. Say, I am that way.
Yeah.
And it does affect my life and it does affect my choices. So that's what I mean by own it.
Yeah.
Then you have to say, well, what am I going to do about it? And you should become aware of that fear to the point that when it starts to bubble up, you recognize it.
Mm-hmm.
You recognize it. And when you recognize it, in your mind, say, I don't want to be that way. And you have to be careful to say, I don't want to be that way, not I don't want to act that way, because we're not trying to produce better actors here. We're trying to produce better people. So a
Right.
lot of people will say, well, I don't want to act that way. And what they'll do is they'll learn when somebody insults them, they'll smile. But inside they're angry. And that's not helpful. That's just
Yes.
stuffing the dirt under the rug, and
Yeah.
pretty soon it builds up to where it becomes poisonous. And the older we get, the more that stuff comes out from under the rug and
And leaks out in our less adorable behaviors and causes more entropy to everybody around us.
yeah. So let's not just stuff it under the rug. We don't want to be that way. And make yourself stop being that way. Now, in the beginning, yes, that's going to be acting, but you have to
Mhm.
not want to be it, because eventually you need to not respond that way. When somebody's critical to you,
Yeah.
well, this wasn't a very good report. Your immediate thing should be, oh, why? Thank you for telling me that. Could you go over it with me and tell me, what you find lacking, and talk about it and analyze it and learn from it, not
Yeah.
get angry because of it. Use it as a positive thing. So
Right.
the idea is to become positive. And when you're positive, nobody can make you upset. Nothing stresses you.
Yeah.
Nobody can take your joy away, because even if they say, wow, that was a crappy thing you did, and I didn't like this and that, and you're an awful person, you go, oh, I wonder
Maybe
why
I
you'd say
was
that.
awful.
Yeah,
Hmm.
explain this to me. I'd like to
Yeah.
see where your opinion comes from. You
Yeah.
see, you can't, you're always happy and you're up. And if somebody says, oh, because look at this, that's all wrong, you shouldn't do that, you might think about it and say, oh, you're right. That
Yeah.
wasn't very helpful, was it? Well, thank you.
Yeah. And you're like, wow, I tell people that's how you level up in the game.
Right. You're
You
still
eat your
happy.
shit sandwich, you level up. You go, great.
So, yeah, so you stay happy if you get rid of your fear. So that's one. Every time you're negative, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And any negative feeling of inadequacy is a big one. Like
Big
almost
one.
everybody feels inadequate
Yeah.
in our culture. Our culture does that to people.
But people feel like they're the only one that feels that way, which is funny, which
That's
creates that
true.
illusion of separation.
Yeah, that's true. So that's one thing. So that will point out the fear. The fear will point out the beliefs. Now, when we have a fear, what we try to do is whitewash it. And that's what our ego is for. Our 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 ego says, "Oh, that's not a black nasty old fear. Let me paint some whitewash on it." See, it's really a good thing. You need to be that way, because if you weren't that way, people would walk all over you. You have to get angry and push back, otherwise you'd be a doormat for them. So they justify it and they whitewash it and they come up with excuses of why that's okay. That's what your ego is all about. And
Yeah.
those are also your beliefs. You start believing that you're really a very superior person, because
Yeah.
you don't let anybody get away with that bullshit. When they call
Yeah.
you down, well, you get right up in their face and let them have it. So
Because you're
nobody
good and they're
call.
bad.
Yeah, right. You're good, they're bad, and these
Hmm.
are your beliefs, and they all come out of the fear. Ego and belief all are products of the fear, and the fear is not hard to find. Just
No.
look at your negativity whenever you feel bad and negative. Now, you can love is all right to feel sad.
Yeah.
Sad isn't necessarily negative. It's
Yeah.
like, I love both of those people. I wish they'd stop fighting with each other. That's just
Yeah.
sad to see them doing that. All right. That's not negativity,
No.
but love can be sad
Yeah.
sometimes.
And there's beauty in that.
Yeah, and there is. You love them both, but they keep hurting each other, and it's
Yeah.
just a sad thing. And you can't fix either one of them, and it just has to. It's just the way it is. You accept it, but
Yeah.
it's a sad thing to accept. So sadness is all right, but getting angry or getting upset, or even blaming others. What's another thing we tend to do? Anything that's not right with us, we blame on somebody else. That's how our ego convinces us that we're okay, we're just fine. It's
Mhm.
the rest of the world that sucks.
I did that because they did such and such. If we do something suboptimal, we go,
Right.
well, I did it because of this and this and this. But if somebody else does something, we're like, they're bad. It's like this total double standard of,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
normal.
Yeah, anything that's negative pointing at us, we can explain
Yeah.
why we had to do it like that, why that was
Yeah.
rational thing to
I was
do.
angry because such and such, somebody else is angry. We're like, oh, you're angry. That's terrible. Like you're bad, or you have no right to feel that way. So we just
Yeah.
go judging. But I think you're right. I think that's a perfect way to say it. And for my listeners that just understand that model, your emotional navigation system is informing you
Hmm.
of whether you're piloting that vehicle of consciousness or whether you're in a hostile takeover from your ego. And that's helpful because
Yes,
that's how we know where the software could use a little optimization to help us enjoy our experience more and grow up.
exactly.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And what about men feeling and expressing their emotions or being taught that they're not allowed to rather than understanding that emotions are just information, I think. They're just, they inform us of where our boo-boos are, where our rough edges are, and also where our authentic alignment is. Like if you feel a lot of resistance or unhappiness about something, it might be, again, that KPI in your system that like, maybe I don't want to be a furniture maker. Maybe I don't, maybe sometimes that emotion is telling you like, hey, you're off road
Yeah,
a little bit. You're going off-roading.
yeah. The feelings, how we feel, are extremely important to us. Like I just said, if you look at those feelings and they're negative, well, that tells you something very important.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at those feelings and they're positive, that also tells you something very important. But you have to know what your feelings are. I know some people, particularly males, that would say, I don't have any feelings.
Yeah.
You know,
Or
I
they don't
got
know how to recognize them.
right, I got rid
They
of all of those
suppress them.
feelings. Right. So the first thing is you have to be aware of all those feelings. You have to accept them because you can't use them as guides to what needs to be fixed and what's okay unless you feel them.
Yeah.
So the thing is, we guys are told from the day we're born pretty much that, if there's a problem, we need to just suck it up, stop complaining
Yeah.
about it, deal with it. That's the manly thing to do. That's what it is. And here's a little study that that shows you how deep that is in our culture. They timed the amount of time that nurses in a nursery where newborns are placed. They timed how long it took for a baby to cry and some nurse to show up and give it some attention. And then after they did show up, how long would that person stay with that crying baby? Did they stay with them a long time until they stopped crying? How long did they stay? And what they found out was that girl babies got attention twice or three times faster than boy babies, and girl babies had two or three times more time spent with them when they were crying than boy babies. So
Wow.
it starts even then. It's so ingrained in our culture. Part of that is because that's part of the male role in our culture. We're the protector. We have to, we're expendable.
Mm-hmm.
And every guy kind of knows he's expendable. He's there for service. He's there to protect
Right.
his tribe, his family, his children. And if that costs his life, well, that's the way it is. That's why when the war comes, the men go sign up. Why don't they say, well, I'm not fighting a stupid war. I'm going to stay home with my family?
Yeah.
Because they have an obligation when the tribe is threatened to go fight. Because if the tribe fails, then there's nobody to protect their women and children. So they have that innate need that they are expendable, and theirs is to get the job done. Yes, do or die. They
Yeah.
kind of have that. Well, if you feel that way, then you have to regulate emotions to some point. You can't be getting too
Yeah.
emotional about, oh, die. I don't want to die. I don't want to
Yeah.
fight a war. People get killed in wars. You
Yeah.
have to, you have to stuff that down where it isn't bothering you anymore. And you have to accept that that is, if there's a war, then you need to join it and you need to fight it, and it may or may not kill you, but that's your job.
Yeah.
That's what you do. So boys always hear and get the suck it up cupcake.
Yeah.
If your knees hurt, suck it up. That's life. You have to deal with that. Deal with it and go on, because that's the male role. They
Mm,
do. They have to deal with that. They can't be fighting or something and say, "Oh, I skinned my knee. Everybody stop." It doesn't
yeah.
work that way. You suck it up and you keep going.
Hmm.
And they're expected, when they're doing things, if you're whatever they're doing, that the hurts and cuts and scrapes and injuries that they get, that's just part of the process.
Yeah.
That's part of the process. They accept that as being part of the process and they suck it up, because that's life. Now, the problem with that is that many men will kind of overdo that to where they suppress all their feelings and
Yes.
they don't even know they have them, you
Yes.
see. And that is detrimental to the men. That's not good. You need to have feelings. Those feelings are important that you have them, but you don't have to share them. You don't have to spread them around. You don't have to say, "Oh, I don't feel so good today. I think maybe I should stay home because I just don't feel right." Well, a girl can say that, and they'll
Yeah.
say, "Oh, poor baby, and you don't feel good." Okay. But if a guy says that, somebody says, "Suck it up, cupcake. Get your
Yeah.
books and go to school," because it's what you have to do.
Yeah.
So the men have to learn to keep their emotions, even though those emotions may never lead to action, because mostly if they're negative emotions, they're going to have to suck it up and do it anyway. It's just part of being male that you suck it up and continue doing what needs to be done. If you're fixing a car and you rip, all the skin off of your knuckle, you don't quit. You wrap it up with something and you get back in there and you do it. Sure, it
Hmm.
hurts like hell. Well, you deal with that hurt. You just let that pain go to the background and you deal with it and you keep doing what you do. It's a male attitude. Females are not made that way.
Hmm.
That's not the same way. So that's one way men are different than females. They do learn at a very early age that they can cry and maybe somebody will eventually come around, but they're not all that important.
Yeah.
And they will need to just accept that in life, that they are expendable. And in order to be expendable, you have to you have to take stuff and let it be. Accept it. Don't complain about it. Don't fuss about it. So you have a hard time getting a man to go see a doctor.
Yes.
A woman has a pain in or whatever, and she says, "I got to go see a doc." A man gets a pain in an arm and he says, we'll see. It'll go away in a week or two. That's because he innately sucks it up. That's part of being male. We're just like that. So, but you have to also encourage them, have your feelings, understand your feelings,
Yeah.
embrace your feelings. They're real. Okay, I'm a shoemaker and I'd rather be a carpenter.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a feeling you have. Have it, realize it, keep it. But because your family depends on you being a shoemaker, because that's the only skill you know, and that's how you're going to feed your family, well, suck it up, cupcake, and start making shoes.
Right.
Or find a path to take you someplace else.
Hmm.
Find an alternative. Find some other way to feed your
Yeah.
family until you can apprentice as a carpenter and start making money that way. Find another route. That's another possibility. Doesn't
Yeah.
mean you have to suffer everything that comes. That's not what suck it up cupcake means. It means that stuff that you can't fix, the stuff that's outside of your control,
Right.
suck it up. The stuff that's inside your control that you can fix, well, make a plan, fix
Right.
it. But you need to know the difference of
More
what's inside your control.
empowered rather than, because I think emotions are, I don't think it's healthy when a lot of men that I work with all over the world, they've sort of, an analogy I heard once that I thought was clever. I don't know who to credit for it, but they did a great job. Was that you have all these emotional beach balls that you stuff under the water. But if you have all of these emotional beach balls, it's just emotions or energy in motion. So it requires a lot of energy to keep them from like going up, and that might cause hypertension, disease. So then I help men sometimes learn how to understand their emotions and the emotions of their partner so that they can have a more delicious, delightful, sensual relationship with them emotionally. But for instance, I have one client who's a CEO and one client who's a homicide detective, and they've sort of opened this up and now they're like, okay, I understand better, but I'm having trouble now not crying when I go be a homicide detective, or I'm a CEO making, hundreds of millions of dollar decisions. And now I feel like I'm going to cry so I sometimes I I don't know how to find
Yeah.
that line of I don't want you to suppress your emotions, but you got to also know when to process them and have an effective tool to process
Yeah.
them, maybe with your partner or your wife or your girlfriend or
Yeah.
your
The first
boyfriend.
thing you do is you have to sort them into piles, and one pile is the things you can do something about, and the piles you can't. And the piles you can't do anything about, you you just accept that is
Mhm.
your life. You can't do anything about that. Now, those things you can't do anything about, every once in a while you should review them, because sometimes there is something you could do. You just didn't
Didn't see a
think of it.
choice.
You just didn't see it, and
Yeah.
you'll see it later. So you go back and are constantly reviewing those things that you just accept
Yeah.
and give them another look to see, well, is that still the same? But now all the things you can do something about, okay, then you need to then have the feelings about that. You need to embrace them. Okay, so you're a homicide detective. You're going to see a lot of gruesome stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what you can't do anything about is the ugliness that's out in the world. What you can't do anything about is all the, very high entropy behavior and very nasty, self-centered people out there. So
Hmm.
you accept that is the way it is out there. Accept it. Okay. So now you can go and you can see that and you can just, yeah, there's some really sick people out here and they do really sick things. And it's not something, you just accept that and let it go. It's
Hmm.
not, you have to pull that in as part of your emotional stuff, because then,
Hmm.
yes, it makes you cry, it makes you upset. And now you can't do your job, because your job is to look at that clinically and logically,
Yeah.
find clues and find little bits of things that are, you know, give you some idea of who the perpetrator is. And you need to be smart and you need to have your act together. You can't be going, oh, this is so sad.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're
exactly.
you're a professional and you've got work to do.
Yeah.
So you realize the fact that there is meanness and nastiness in the world, I can't fix, but I can find the culprits and keep them from doing it from somebody else. So you just accept that, okay, here's a mangled body. It's ugly. And accept that as part of your job, part of life, part of the way people
Yeah.
are. Now your job is to try to find out who did that and keep them from doing it again.
Right.
So that puts them into place. Whereas if go to, I don't know, go to a party or something and somebody says something that upsets you and that's a feeling, don't throw that away. That's something you can do something about.
Right.
Put that in the category of, well, that was my reaction to something that was said to me, but it's not a fact of the world. It's
No.
a fact of me
Yeah.
that I found that upsetting, and I can change me.
It's helpful information.
Right. It's helpful information. I can't change the world. Ugly
Yeah.
stuff is going to happen. My job, I go see ugly stuff because
Yeah.
that's what I do. Okay. Not a good job to have, maybe, if you're a real sensitive person,
Yeah.
but that's what you go do. And you can learn to just stop that.
Hmm.
Same with doctors. Doctors can't get but so emotionally involved with their patients. Otherwise, they're not good doctors.
Yeah.
They have to say, okay, I got to stick in a knife here and rip this open and find this thing and whatever.
Yeah.
And if they're, oh no, this is a terrible thing to have happen. Well, now they're not going to be a very good doctor. They're
No.
going to mess up because they're not focused. They're focused on their feelings. Well, you just have to say people will get ill. Sometimes they'll need their chest ripped open in order to fix it. And you've got the skills to do it. Do it.
Yeah.
Don't get involved in it. Just do it. It's not a place for your emotions. So
Right.
you don't have emotions there. But when you go home and see your wife, realize that, okay, I've had a hard day. I lost 3 patients today.
Yeah.
And that's a little upsetting for me because I
Mm-hmm.
think maybe I could have done better. So you have to then realize that that's a feeling. Now
Mm-hmm.
that's a feeling you can do something about. You
Mm-hmm.
should talk to your wife about that.
Yeah.
Share that. You say, you're not just keep it inside.
Not
That's a
stuff that
different,
beach ball down.
because that's something you can do something about.
Right.
The fact that this person needs to have their chest ripped open to have something fixed inside,
Yeah.
that's just stuff that happens. You accept that. So it's separating the things that you can do something about, like I'm upset because I've had a bad day. I can do something about that. I'm upset because my crime victim was mutilated, or
Yeah.
this perfectly nice person,
Yeah.
was near death from an accident or something, taking too
Mm-hmm.
many pills or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Then I need to distance myself from that. Nothing I can do anything about that. So
Yeah.
that's the thing. What are the things I can fix? What are the things I can't fix?
Right.
Things you can't fix, suck it up, cupcake. That's your job.
Yeah.
Deal with it. The things that you can fix, well, slide them off to the side and deal with them when you can fix them. You don't
Right.
have to fix everything now. You don't have to be worried about, okay, you lost two patients and now you're not going to do very well with the third because you're so, rattled by the fact that you lost two. No, that's not
Right.
acceptable. You need to
Right.
be your best for that third. Put all that stuff off.
You can
Okay.
put it
But
all in a to be sorted later.
to be sorted later, not in the under the rug to be
Yeah.
ignored forever. That's not where you
Right.
put those. The things you can do something about to be sorted later.
That's
And
a
then
big
you
difference.
you remember to sort them later. So what we tend to do is that we tend to be, all one way or another. We stuff everything out of sight, everything.
Yeah.
I don't have any feelings. I don't
Yeah.
do emotions. I
Yeah.
found out early on that emotions just cause trouble, so I stopped having them. I
Yeah.
refuse to have
I'd
them.
evolved out of them.
Yeah, which means you still have them. It's just that you refuse to deal with them and look
Yeah.
at them. They're still there and they're still causing trouble. And that's why you have an ulcer,
Yeah.
is because of all those feelings. But you just refuse to look at them and deal with them.
Yeah.
So you have, you know, we have this tendency to do it all one way or another. It's all
Right.
feelings. I cry every time somebody gets a headache. I cry
Yeah.
in all the movies when the dog, gets lost. I have all of this, and then the opposite. I never cry at all.
Yeah.
Because I'm tough, I'm hard, and I don't let anything get to me.
Yeah.
Well, that's not good. You have to have those feelings you can do something about,
Right.
and those go in a separate place. You don't have to deal with them now, but you do have to deal with them. You
Mm-hmm.
do have to pull them up, because those feelings are the things that are going to tell you whether it's your problem because of your fear,
Yeah.
or what you can do about it, what
Yeah.
you should do about it. Well, okay, you had a bad day at work. Go home and talk about it. Just don't go home and be sulky, and
Or blow up.
yeah, blow
Or
up,
yeah.
get annoyed with your children, get annoyed with the dog, and that
Yeah.
sort of thing because you're feeling grouchy.
Yeah.
That isn't helpful. That's just hurting everything
Yeah.
around you. Recognize, I've got this feeling. I feel
Yeah.
bad. Because I feel bad because I had a bad day at work,
Yeah.
and go tell. You can tell your family, I had a really bad day at work.
Yeah.
This happened, the other thing happened, and I just feel like crap because of it. But
Yeah.
I'm still I'm still going to have fun with my family,
Yeah.
so you still, hold your little girl in your lap, you still toss the ball with your son, you do things, you say, but I'm not going to be maybe as jolly as I usually am because I've got this stuff, but I'm
Yeah.
still I'm still going to be there and do what I need to do. I'm not just come out and holler at everybody and stumble up to my room, and because all that is
Sulk.
self-centered. It's all
Yeah.
about me and my
Me.
feelings, and nobody else matters as much as
Yeah.
me. Well,
Yeah.
that's not good. Other people matter too. So again, suck it up, cupcake, until you can deal with it in
Mm-hmm.
a reasonable way. Don't don't penalize other people for your emotional issues. But yeah, males get that idea about sucking it up from the day they're born. It's just
Wow.
part of our culture is like that. And if you're a guy and you are at a job or at school or any place else there are other guys, and you get hurt,
Mm.
complaining about it and fussing about it will just get you in deep trouble,
Yeah.
because the other men around you will start calling you names and giving you a hard time and putting you down and so on. You learn you have to be tough. You have to be strong,
Hmm.
because that comes out of our heredity as well as humans. If you're on a hunt, everybody on that hunt has a job. There's the
Right.
ones that scare the animal and move them in a particular direction. There's the ones that are waiting on the other side for that animal to show up.
Yeah.
Everybody has to do their job.
Yeah.
And if you say, well, I didn't do my job because I stepped on a thorn and my foot hurt, that's not going to go over well. Okay. If you stepped on a thorn and your foot hurt, then let the damn foot hurt while you do your job, because the rest of us are depending on you to do your job.
Yeah.
So the the males had to be able to do their job in a war, in a hunt, in building a building a house, building a structure, whether it collapsed on them or not. They had to
Yeah.
cooperate, they had to work together, and being hurt is not something you spread around by them not doing your job. You suck it up, you deal with it, and you go on.
Right.
That is part of the male world. So telling men that that's not true, you should just be emotional, that won't fly, because that's not the way they're made.
No.
But convincing them that they don't have to hide all their emotions, they may have to put them aside for a while, because where they are now, it's not, there's not a good time to deal
Not
with
the
them.
right time or place.
Right. It's not the time
Yeah.
or place to deal with them, but they're still there, and you can't ignore them. You have to bring them up, because if you ignore them, they build, they build, they build. Pretty soon they go bang, and
Yeah.
that's very dysfunctional. When they go, when they explode, then what is it? Mental breakdown, or
Yeah.
divorce,
Burnout or
or
yeah, or
burnout, or yeah,
unfulfilling relationships.
yeah. It's just, yeah, something happens, and it usually is not just you. You take other
Yeah.
people with you with those kinds of things. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's the. I don't know. I'm really bad about getting your questions answered. So
No, you're
let's.
amazing. I think this is all really helpful, and I trust that it's what somebody needs to hear. I do think it's like this fascinating time in humanity where we are sort of redefining roles and redefining for men what it means to be a man. And I find for anybody listening, I'll put a link in the show notes, but I create very specific things. And it's so funny that you say people sorting. My husband laughs because he used to think I was becoming like avoidant if there's something that we need to work on. But I usually say, just give me a minute. And he's like, what? And now he knows. He's like, oh, just give her a minute. She's sorting thoughts. And
Yeah.
literally do what you said. I say I'm sorting them into piles. And then for myself, I created a trigger protocol where later, when it's appropriate time, I sit down and I say, what was that telling me? Am I in fear? Was I being self-centered? Was it an old wound being picked at? Was it a boundary? Was it
Mhm.
my ego? Was it whatever it is? I go through later when that emotion has passed and it's an
Right.
appropriate time to process it either by myself or with my husband.
Right.
And it's sort of like it's these practical tools I find very useful to help us
Yes.
navigate things that we used to be very unskillful at.
Yeah.
And what would you say to men who I how can men support each other better in the future as we evolve?
Well, men are kind of natural loners compared to women. Women have this thing called own group preference.
Hmm.
Women, back in the early times, women also had to depend on other women. If they were sick, they needed help taking care of those kids. If they were unable to do something, or they had a child with a special need or special whatever, they needed somebody to pick up the slack with the other 6 kids that they had while they tended to this thing. So they had to have the support of other women, or they wouldn't be able to get by. Their family would never make it. So they have this thing called an own group preference that women
Hmm.
need to have girlfriends. They need to have other women friends to interact with. And
Hmm.
yes, they can interact in a male environment just fine. But if they do that and they do that all the time, they got a part of them that's kind of empty, that's not quite
Hmm.
connected yet. They need to have some female friends where they can female talk in female language and whatever, and it's just relaxing and it just
Yeah.
feels good and it's nice to
Community.
have that. It's like you're off duty, you know,
Yeah.
when you're dealing with men, then you're on duty. This is, you know, there's business to be discussed, there's things that have to be done. But
Right.
with your women friends, you're off duty and you're just sharing stuff.
Yeah.
And that is important to women. Women need friends that are also women. That's an important part. Otherwise, they they get too wrapped up in their intellect and they don't service their feelings and their emotions as well. So it's
Hmm.
just a thing. It's part of our DNA. Women form these relationships with other women. Men don't have that. It doesn't mean men can't be really good friends. They can be really good friends, and those friendships can be very meaningful, but that's not the fundamental thing.
It's
That
a different
happens.
need, like it's a
It's a
different
different
need
level of
structure.
need. Yeah, this thing I'm talking about with women is innate. It's not
Interesting.
situational. Men make friends situational. Oh, here's my buddies. We're all in the foxhole together. We
Yeah.
all, you know, have to keep each other alive. So you get real strong bonds can be built around that, but that's all situational. Women just
Hmm.
connect with each other just because the female to female has a certain relaxed bond to it that brings another dimension into a woman's life that's very nice and relaxing and no stress.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's that's there. But men are not like that. Men tend to be more loners,
Right.
and the reason that they are loners is that they they will experience their friends, best friends, casual friends, guy next door, not surviving. A lot of men don't survive in the, you know, I'm going back now 200,000 years, you know, where
Right. Okay.
life is hard. Men tend not to survive. So you have to say, okay, George got
Oh,
killed on that hunt. Sam, you're going to take his place. Now you're the third beater from the left, and here's your job.
maybe it would have been
And
too hard to have those emotional bonds.
exactly, if that is, if you know, it's difficult.
Right.
That happens a lot. The men are expendable. They can't have somebody gets killed and they're all broken up about it for a week. Uh-uh. Somebody gets killed and they deal with it and they go on even that same day, that same hour, and do whatever it is they have to do
Yeah.
because a lot of people are depending on their success. So men got to be to the point that they would help each other in the sense that, you know, George, if you held that spear overhand rather than underhand, you'd be able to throw it a lot further. And then George may say
Right.
thank you, and he may try that. So they'll share each other things. They'll tell each other,
Right.
you know, well, when you fix one of these cars, make sure that you unplug this first, or do it, otherwise, you know, you'll get shocked. So they do that. They'll share things in their work to help everybody get the job done together. But that's about it.
Right.
Past that, when the job's over, everybody goes home and
Right.
really they don't really have a need to hang out together. And the idea that after work all the guys go to the bar,
Yeah,
that's
exactly what I was gonna say.
yeah, that isn't because they're bonding. That's because they don't want to go home.
Because they're avoiding.
They're avoiding
Yeah.
they're self medicating.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They're going to the bar to forget about things in their life that they don't want to deal with, and they're not going home because it's not a pleasant place to be. They don't want
Yeah.
to go home. They're avoiding. So it's not that they have such great camaraderie that they all want to hang out together at the bar. They're all
It's
going to
that
bar.
their relationships are maybe too high entropy.
Yeah, that's probably what the problem is. So men tend to be loners. They tend to not make really deep relationships
Right.
because that would be, you would interfere with them getting their job done.
Right. That is something I
So
could notice with men in my life. I'll say, "Oh, you hung out with so and so. How's that, knee problem he's been having? Did their baby get that, that surgery they were leaving?" They're like,
and they
"How would
say,
I know?"
yeah, never talk about it.
No.
No,
Like, what did you guys talk about? They're like,
they
"Oh
talk about
no."
they talk about things that are not personal. They talk
Yeah.
about sports. They talk about
Yeah.
other things. But anything is personal, they don't talk about it.
Interesting.
That's their life, and they're not that interested because okay, the fact that my friend's child had a bellyache today, what does that do? What does that have to do with me and getting my job done?
Yeah.
Nothing. Don't
Right.
bother telling me. I don't need to know. You see, because we're
Right.
very goal oriented. We have to get the job done. We have to catch the rabbit. We have to,
Right.
keep the bear from marauding the cave. We're very goal focused on the things we have to do. We need to find shelter. We need to do this. We need to do that. And that's kind of the way we're made. And if it's not on that track, I don't have time for it, not interested for it. And they don't talk about their personal lives and what's going on and their wives and what their wives tell them. And
Right.
they don't do any. And if they do that, it's very unusual, and it's just misery commiserating with misery sort of things.
Could there be a healthier version of that? Like something that struck me. There's a couple of things you said that struck me that I made a little note of here. The first one is, so a lot of men will tell me, like, I've had times, Tom, where I'll have three men in one week tell me the same thing. And they're like, "I have a big confession." And they'll tell me, and they'll be like, Isn't this horrible?" I'll be like, "Oh, you're fine. You're fine. You're literally the third guy that's told me that in 3 days. Why don't you tell each other that?" Like, then maybe it'd be okay. And they wouldn't feel so, that would maybe lower entropy of the system if they were like, "Hey, guess what? I'm not the only one who has penis insecurity, or I'm not the only one
Yeah,
who has, whatever it is that's keeping them up at night, that they're like, I'm the only one that feels this way." But really, they're
right.
surrounded in a locker room full of men who are also feeling that way. And maybe if they knew that, then it wouldn't be a problem. They'd just be like, "This is normal. Let's move on and get stuff done."
Yeah, but it doesn't work that way. It's not the way men are. They're not going to discuss that in the locker room.
Right.
And
Fair.
because what would happen is if they discuss a personal problem in the locker room, most of the guys in the locker room would start to jeer and make fun of them and start making jokes at their expense.
Yeah.
And it may go on for weeks, if not months, that harangue, that
Right.
harassment.
But in the future, could it maybe be helpful when we're less, when we're more evolved?
Perhaps, there's a lot of things that could be in the future. We are a product of you know, our
Choices.
environment, but we carry around a lot of instincts that are born out of 100,000 years ago,
Right.
200,000 years ago, and we carry those instincts. Now, we don't have that kind of violent environment. We don't have, another tribe on our block going to come and burn
Stealing our
everybody's house
women.
down. Yeah,
Yeah.
take the women and children. We don't have any of that. All
Hmm.
that's gone away, but we still have that same instincts built around that.
Right.
And if you get a guy and he's in a locker room or a place with a lot of guys and he says, you know, I'm always worried that my penis is too short, they will start to call him
That's fair.
shorty.
That's
They will
fair.
make fun of him. They will
Yeah.
ridicule him. They'll laugh at him. And that will go on sometimes for years,
Yeah.
not just that week, but that
Right.
nickname will stick forever. So basically, you give up personal information and you get teased and
Hasn't
hounded.
been safe historically.
No, it's just not a safe thing to do because what the men are saying when they give other men a hard time is don't burden me with your problem. You deal with your problems. I'll deal with my problems. I don't really want to hear about your problems. And if you're going to bring a problem out here, none of us want to hear about it. You just need to suck it up and deal with it and not share it
Hmm.
because, and if you don't, we'll hound you to death. We'll make you wish you hadn't said anything.
Yeah.
So That's
Mm.
kind of the way it is. That's the instinct, is that you don't deal with that. You don't want, when you're on a hunt, or if you're in a war, your emotional connections with the other people are not something that you want
The
to have.
detriment.
They're a detriment. You have a
Yeah.
job to get done. And if that means you have to step up into a breach that's in a line, then you do that. And it's not,
Hmm.
if you make choices, you make them strictly on what's going to succeed and
Yeah.
not what's going to fail, not on, well, I wouldn't want Georgie up there because, he just had a baby with, this happened to him. And, nah, everybody does their job. Everybody takes the risks. Some people will die, some people won't. But it's you can't have a lot of emotional connection with people if you're going to, if you're going to go to war with them.
Right.
They have to do the job. If you're in charge, you tell people to go do this, go do that. And the emotional stuff isn't there. It's how well can they do that job? That's
Hmm.
what's important. And if they have, 6 children to feed, but that's the best man to hold that line, and you put him up there, you don't say, well, he has 6 children, so we'll get Harry over here to do it instead, because you always do what you think you need to do to win,
Yeah.
not to make people feel good, because losing is untenable. So
Right.
that's the that's the attitude. So that's why men have this kind of suck it up to cupcake. You got to be tough. You got to be hard. That's as innate as anything. And trying to get men to let that go. Say, hey guys, we don't have wars every day anymore. We're not having that. Nobody's trying to
Yeah.
steal your wife and children.
You're safe.
You're
Yeah.
safe. You're okay. You can change. Yeah, but good luck with that.
It's gonna
It's
happen
going to run. It's
slowly.
going to run counter, because the opposite runs so deep in
Right.
their psyche, and it's
Mm.
not because they were taught to be that way by their fathers. They just are that way because they've got a Y where you have an X, and that's why they're that way.
So maybe to your point, that's why it is an effective dynamic for me to help men just sort of explore some of those things in a safe place that allow them to be
Exactly.
more embodied in their masculine. And I think something else you said about feminine, which wasn't really our topic today, but I'm reflecting as you spoke. I think definitely I can identify periods in my life where I experience what you're talking about, disconnection from other women, because I think in my generation, women were in society, we became a little too masculine. We were
Yeah.
competition, right?
Right.
I was like talking about traveling out of body and consciousness. And what do you think we're here on the planet for? When I was a little kid, the little girls were like, we're playing Barbies. You're out of here. Like I got beat up a lot.
Yeah.
So I did never had that sort of really close, safe feminine because we were always seen as like competition or, you know, and I
Yes.
think that as we evolve back to some of those roots, I think it'll be very healthy for the divine feminine and the feminine to sort of learn to lean on each other, not see each other as competition, but create that safe place and fill our buckets so that when the men come home and are like, you wouldn't believe what happened today, we're like, here, I got you. Like, I've got
Right.
you. Everything's going to be okay.
Yes. That is true. Women will compete over men,
Mm-hmm.
but they also will be friends and do almost anything for a good friend.
Mm-hmm.
They do, like the men don't. The men are more loners. The
Yeah.
women tend to work together. That's why in what is it called, middle school,
Mm-hmm.
the girls all kind of group up in girl gangs. Now you probably didn't,
I
but
didn't.
most of the girls, yeah, my wife Pamela didn't either. So she was never part of a girl gang. She thought that was ridiculous. All
I
the
thought
women
it was
talk about.
absurd. I didn't care what they were talking about. I wanted to know what the boys were talking about.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, they group up like that into girl gangs because that's part of their own group preference. That
Yeah,
gives them the support and
that makes sense.
yeah, it's a
It
support
takes a
structure.
village, as they say.
Yeah, that's their support structure.
Right.
And within that, there's it's kind of an unspoken word that you don't mess with each other's boyfriends.
Yeah.
And there's certain do's and don'ts in the group. Now
Yeah.
that other group, oh, you can mess with their boyfriends all you want,
Yeah.
but not in this group.
This is our
So
code. Yeah.
yeah, so they become friends and they will do things for each other. They will help each other out. And that's a very genuine kind of connection. And females interacting with females as support, emotional support, work support. If you have a whole lot of things you have to do and you just can't duplicate yourself to do them all,
Yeah.
well, you have a couple of girlfriends, they'd be glad to step in
Yeah.
and do those things for you. Take a job take a job you have to do
Yeah.
that now you can stay home with a husband who's ill or something like that. Oh, there they are.
Yeah,
So
I love that collaboration. That sort of
yeah,
like, hey, I actually love it, but I really dislike cooking. Well, this woman's like, oh, well, I don't want to change another diaper or play, Barbies as long as I live. So, you want to sit and play with the children all day? I would love to cook meals for everybody from
exactly.
scratch that are nutritious. And I'd love to do the gardening. Great. You do the gardening instead of this, like, you have to do it all and be it all, which brings us out of authentic alignment, which is the catalyst for some of our more obnoxious ego
Yeah.
behavior.
Yeah, that's exactly why. We talked about in the future there may be other kind of groups of
Yeah.
people. That's why a threesome with one man and two women tends to work well because the
Hmm.
two women have own group preference. They will help each other. That's instinctive with them. They'll fill each other's needs. They'll do the things the other one doesn't want to do. So
Yeah.
they will work together and help each other, and that's part of men. Yeah, the men will sort of do that to a practical extent, but it's never going to be very personal. With
Yeah.
women, it's you can depend on that that person to be there when you need them. So it's a yeah. So the two females, one male works good just because that's the nature of females to support each other. Now men support each other too in the job to get the job done. But
Right.
that's different than your personal life.
Right.
Is it
Because
two
men
different?
can collaborate very effectively.
Yes.
And the lower
Yeah.
entropy they are, the better they can think less
Yes.
self-centeredly and more as a collective, like, hey, what's good for you, what's good for me, and what's good for the LCS or source or God or the
Yeah.
system or
Right.
consciousness itself. Let's
Right.
look at, because we're all the same, we're all
Yeah.
one. So how
So
can I act with the most love?
yeah, out on the job, they can do that. They can collaborate. They can work. They can backfill for each other. They can be very helpful to each other because their goal is to get the job done. And if
Yeah.
that means they work together and collaborate, well, they're all about that because they're goal oriented and they get the job done. But when it comes time to just have a relationship with somebody, not so much. They're kind of loners and they're all by
Right.
themselves and they don't talk to other men, and it's a
Yeah.
different ball of wax altogether.
Yeah. And I think that's where sometimes those, again, using those terminologies, that monogamous relationship can work if they're really truly compatible people, because
Yeah,
they can feel safe to express some of those things with their wives or their partners, but the women still are getting some of those emotional needs met by their other group of women, so they're not making
yeah,
the man entirely responsible for their emotional outpour.
right. Yes, I think that's very wise. So I think the job that you do with men is just a very necessary and important job because otherwise they're not going to learn do that on their own. They're not going to go and find all the guys in the locker room very supportive of their emotional trauma they're going through. No, they're
Yeah,
going to get ribbed and smacked around and
yeah.
treated very badly if they share any of that emotional trauma.
But I'm
So,
also like, okay, but we've also gotta, let's, like I said, Mike, let's eat your shit sandwich. That's how you level up in the game. And then here's how we're going to practically handle that. I'm going to tell you like it
right,
is. And here's how
right,
you're going to do better. Just do
yep,
better.
yep. And
Just reprogram. It's just crappy
I
software.
think mostly they can handle that.
Yeah.
That's straightforward. That's good.
And I
That's the
think they
way it
can
handles.
feel at their soul level or whatever we want to call that, that I come true. I don't judge anybody for
Yeah,
anything. I
that's
deal
the
with some
key.
very high entropy behavior. I don't mind. I'm like,
Yeah,
great. You have it. If you're willing to look at it, it's okay. So I don't judge them. I think they can feel that it's
they
coming
do.
from an absolute love and empathy where I'm like, okay,
Exactly. You don't judge them.
Or I laugh. I'm like, that's ridiculous. Do you want to know some ridiculous, obnoxious things I've done? I do lots of them, like
Yeah.
we're
See, not
human, we're
judging them
ridiculous.
is the special thing you offer. Whereas if they go to all their comrades in the locker room, they'll be judged by everybody for not manning up, for not sucking up and just going on. They'll be judged harshly. But they need a situation. That's one of the that's what their girlfriend or their wife. One of the important things she gives to him is that she doesn't judge him.
Absolutely.
She just accepts him, and he can open and he can say anything that is
That
true. He can just
unconditional authenticity.
yes, that's exactly right. So that's one of the things that men and women give each other.
Yes.
Is that ability to just be whoever they are and say what they feel, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's not going to be judged. It's not going to, oh, well, that's wrong. That's
Yeah.
the way you feel. That's the way you feel. Now, how can we work with that to
Yes.
help you feel better? So that's the thing that a husband and wife can give each other that's very, very important if
Yeah.
they're not too self-centered. But if either one
Right.
of them self-centered, then that doesn't work out so well. But another neat thing is that a relationship doesn't have to be, the man and the woman in the relationship, or the man and the man, it doesn't matter. But the relationship doesn't have to be of equals. You can have a very giving person who is not at all self-centered and a rather largely self-centered person.
Mm-hmm.
They can have a good relationship. It just takes one of the two. Now, that person who is the less self-centered,
Okay.
their situation will be limited. There's only so much that they will be able to do. The other person won't necessarily help them with the problems, but that's all right. They're not self-centered. They've already solved most all their problems
Yeah.
anyway. You see, they're grown up. They have low entropy. They don't need a lot of that. So they're okay, and they can love that person and help them and be aware of their self-centeredness, and you
And
can
not
get
judge it.
along and not judge it, and they can get along just fine. If you
Yeah.
have two people who are both self-centered, boom,
Yeah.
you get an explosion, and
Yeah.
it's never going to be the peaceful, happy thing that it should be, because they're just not capable. Their capacity for love is just not big enough to reach out and include other people.
But I think that I genuinely believe, and I'm been called an incurable optimist, which I don't mind being called. I really believe that anybody, not that they will, and I don't need people to change. I accept everybody's journey in the game is valid. It's none of my business. But I do believe that anybody can change. And I find that to me, anybody's behavior or entropy, it's just information about what's going on in their software or what's going on in their emotional navigation system, or it's information. So I don't really mind as long
Yeah,
as they're, it's just where they are,
yeah,
and it's not who they are. It's just that avatar is malfunctioning, or they're not in their love. That's our natural state, right? It's
yeah,
love. So they've got the vehicle's just it needs a little
yeah.
maintenance.
I have a friend, and what she says is, I have a kink in my think.
I love that.
Yeah, she says, I have a kink in my think. That's what's wrong.
Yeah.
So,
I say it's just
yeah,
like a little glitch in your software. You just got
yeah,
to reprogram it. It's not your fault. You didn't even program it.
yeah. I'm having a lot of fun with this.
I
This is
am
very
too.
enjoyable. It needs to be talked about. It's the kind of stuff I'm going to talk about in my book, Male and Female, and it really needs to get out there, because
Does.
there are, if there was just a few men who were having trouble and a few women that were having trouble, it wouldn't be such a big problem. But it's like 95% of the population is in deep trouble
Yeah.
trying to find those kinks in their think and
Yeah.
and deal with them. It's like almost everybody
Yeah.
needs somebody to talk to, that they can be open with, that they can be authentic with,
Yeah.
and you offer them that, and
As do
that's a
you.
and that's a very necessary and beautiful thing. So the more of this that gets out into the world, the better the world will be. So I would like to talk to you again, and we could keep.
I would love that.